Good morning. Oh, it's cold outside. Did you stick your nose out the door yet? Just look at the screen door. Here, let's look at my screen door. Look at the screen door, and I'll show you why you don't want to be out there very long. Yeah, she's frosted over. Stay inside. How's everybody? Have you got some good plans for today? Let's check in on Blossom and Alexander and see what they're up to. Though the barn was haunted, it no longer is, thanks to me and Alexander Armsworth. He had the gift of seeing the ghost as plain as day. I had the talent for involving myself in other people's business. Same as me. Between us, we got the ghost out of the barn and into a quiet grave. The whole business embarrassed Alexander considerably, though it did not faze me. My name didn't figure in the local write-up. The reporter on the story was spooning at the time with Alexander's big sister Lucille, so he featured the Armsworth strongly, leaving me out. His name is Lowell Seaworth, and I don't hold it against him. He's since married Lucille Armsworth, so I have no doubt he's paying for all of his past mistakes. The ghost which got such a big play last spring came to light entirely due to my mama. She was the first to perceive its presence. Gypsy blood runs in her veins, giving her the second sight and the gift of seeing the unseen, like Alexander, but better. She's just a great hand at dealing in the supernatural that we were run out of Skykeston, Missouri, where we originated. They won't burn you for a witch in Skykeston, but they will make it hot for you. Yike. The blood is running thin, though, and I doubted that I'd inherited any mystical gifts. At least they had not shown up yet, so here again, the only advantage I might have had seemed to pass me by. Anybody with a drop of gypsy blood in her veins would gladly lay some claim to mystical powers. But what's not inherited can sometimes be manufactured. I like that. I like the way she's thinking. Halloween in Bluff City, as elsewhere in a marvelous time of year for boys to play the fool. Nothing inflamed them like an excuse to disturb the peace and a harvest moon to light their way. Mama and me were never troubled by pranksters. They paid us no mind generally, but on Halloween they went out of their way to shun us. Even now, no one is sure of the extent of my mama's gift and how she might use it against you. I like that. But I made it my business at Halloween of the year of 1913 to be out and about myself. Boys will repeat the same tricks, never tiring of them, but there's anything more predictable than a boy, I haven't met it. I decided to give a certain gang of them something to think about. Indeed, I meant to scare them out of a year's growth. My motive was not spotless. It involved Alexander Armsworth. Me and him had been drawn together over that ghost business. Directly after we'd settled in, though, he kept his distance. I was not sweet on Alexander, since a person does not like to be picked up and then dropped. I decided to let him know I was still a girl to be reckoned with. But is she sweet on Alexander? A little bit. Besides, he'd fallen in with a gang of rough types. Bub Timmons was one of them, and so was Champ Ferguson. The chief troublemaker was Les Dawson, a bully of more brawn than brain, which is often the case with bullies, isn't it? Nobody cares to lock horns with him. I was shortly to do just that. They were all older than Alexander, though Les Dawson was in our grade, being left behind several semesters. It was entirely like Alexander to mix with an older crowd, being drawn into their doings. Do you have friends that sometimes do things you know aren't quite right, but you're drawn to it? I know. Out in the Horace Mann schoolyard, it was hard work not to overhear the gang's plans for Halloween mischief. They whispered about it every recess, boxing each other about the head and ears as boys do. Their Halloween plan was nothing more than to turn over people's outhouses. Progress in Bluff City is spotty. Only the chosen few have indoor plumbing. Much of the town on my side of the tracks is still dotted with privies. I had little trouble plotting the gang's course. Since ghosts were still on the minds of many people, I planned a costume to feature myself as one. How many of you have gone trick-or-treating as a ghost? It's the easiest costume in the world to make. By dark on Halloween night, I had ready a garment made out of old bed linens. One ragged sheet provided me with a full skirt and a trailing train. I devised 2 bat-wing sleeves from a pair of pillow slips. I shook a full cup of cake flour over my face and my hair and worked it in, to complete my disguise as the shade of a dead girl. I draped a mosquito bar over my head as a veil, and I carried a candle in my hand and a box of safety matches in my shoe top to light up my frightful face when the moment was right. She's prepared. As I stepped out into the evening, the town was alive with young children trick-or-treating from house to house. Half scared of themselves and each other, they kept to the roads and the front walks. I flitted through the backyards, not wanting to give the little ones a turn. Though it was a clear night, there was wisps of fog. I moved with some quick steps, and my white skirts billowed behind me for all the world like floating. Listen, I wouldn't have liked to meet me in a dark alley. Did you ever get dressed up so scary you didn't even want to look in the mirror? Glowing a ghastly white, I glided down the garden rows, past woven wire fences, lingering behind wood piles to observe how my drapings settled. There was a nip in the air, but I was warmed by my plans. They were to figure out which of the outhouses Alexander's gang would push over first. I reflected on what a lot of trouble this gave innocent people and considered I was doing the property owners a favor. I might cure that gang of vandalism permanently. The first privy I came to was on the back of Old Man Leverett's place. He's a retired farmer moved to town, but he keeps to his country ways and is not the type to invest in an indoor toilet. His outhouse stood like a sentry box outside the rising moon. Here was a temptation the boys could not resist. I waited like a terrible statue for a time, seeming to hear the gang's stealthy footsteps in the distance. For the practice, I sighed and moaned. What does that sound like? You try it. Ooh, oh. Okay, you do it. It's very fun. You could scare somebody just in the night with that sound. My intention was to step just inside the privy and pull the door shut. Then when the gang approached to tip it over, I planned to step out with the lighted candle and moan eerily. If this wouldn't take them half dead with horror, what would? I grinned under my mosquito bar at my plans. Also, I grinned too soon. Foreshadowing, Mrs. Farnsworth. As there was no breeze that night, I fished the matches out of my shoe top, lit my candle as I stepped up to Old Man Levitt's privy door. At this point, things went seriously wrong. I had one foot inside when I came face to face with Old Man Leverett. He was in his privy using it. His nightshirt was hitched up above his hips. My candle, threw dreadful shadows in the tiny room, and light fell on Old Man Privy's startled face and on the torn pages of the Montgomery Ward catalog in his aged hands. Why does he have Montgomery Ward's catalog in there? You're too young to know. We didn't buy toilet paper. You used the page out of a catalog to wipe your bottom. It worked, but it wasn't pleasant. Near enough to the grave himself, he let out a kind of a Indian war whoop. He rose up, thought better of it, flopped back down on the seat. I was as startled as he was. and the wind from his gasping breath set the candle flame just a bobbing. Who in the Sam Hill are you? Old man Levitt howled. I beg your pardon, I'm sure, I said, not wanting to identify myself. I took a step backwards, but his hand snaked out and grabbed my wrist. Pages from the catalog fluttered away like moths. My presence of mind failed me, and I said, I just happened to be passing. So was I, old man Levitt roared. He could tell by grasping my wrist that I was human. Giving it a painful wrenching, he pushed me out the door, which closed between us. As I lifted my sheets to take flight, I heard his voice from inside still roaring. Don't you light out, missy. I got business with you. As near fear as I've ever been, I waited until old man Leverett stepped out into the yard. Lit by the moon, we seemed like a pair of ghosts, what with his white nightshirt and a shock of flowing white hair above his lion's face. If you're trick-or-treating, he said, still gasping, you can go around to the front door of the house and take your chances like anybody else. My candle had gone out by then, and I had thrown my veil back from my face. He fixed me with a watery eye, but couldn't place me. And just who do you happen to be, he said, and waited for an answer. I'm Letty Shambaugh, I replied, naming a stuck-up girl in my grade whose name occurred to me. Explain yourself before I cut a switch and strip your legs. It wasn't easy to explain to old man Leverett that I had his best interests at heart and only meant to save his outhouse from a tipping over. And how would he like to be tipped over in it? I nearly added this, but I didn't. He is one of those people who don't like being convinced. But when I mentioned a gang of boys planning to knock over every outhouse between here and the city limits, he began to nod. I didn't name these boys, but I made it clear that I meant to teach them a lesson. If not in his privy, then in another one. Oh, this is getting good. We're back at Halloween. I have a project today I'd like to invite you to work with me on later in the day. People my age and a little older, some younger, like pickled beets. And I sold a lot of them at the farmer's market. So my project today is to take canned beets that all the work's already done and pickle them and see how they turn out. What do you think of that? Would you like to help me with that? Appreciate that. I love you dearly. I'm proud that you stand tall and look at people's faces when they talk to you. You can practice with me if you want to. You don't have to stare at them all the time. You can look away eventually. But as they're talking directly to you, you be sure and look at them, will you? You look great. I'm proud of you. Be brave. Stay tall. Bye.